Hi, you're watching Reddit Confessions, the place where secrets sting and silence breaks. Let me take you to the exact moment everything I believed in turned into background noise. The party was already too loud when I realized no one was talking to me anymore. There was glitter in the grass, half-burnt sparklers in a bucket of ice water, and someone blasting an early 2000s playlist like we were 19 again. I remember standing there with a paper plate full of cold sliders, wondering if anyone had even noticed I was still there. Turns out, they had noticed. They just didn't care. Valerie, my wife, or whatever that word means now, was standing by the patio bar, laughing with her old friend Jace like they were starring in their own romantic comedy. She had her hand on his chest. He had his hand on her waist. I had nothing but a plastic fork and a fake smile stretched too tight across my face. I know I should have said something. Maybe cracked a joke. Pulled her aside. Confronted the heat rising in my chest. But instead, I did what I always do. I blended into the background like a socially anxious throw pillow. I nodded when people walked by. I sipped a warm soda. I waited for her to remember I existed. Then she did something I wasn't prepared for. Not even close. She walked right over to me, with him, still holding his hand. Her eyes were glassy, her lipstick slightly smudged, and that smile could have curdled milk. In front of all our friends, she said loudly enough for people to turn their heads, "My unfaithful wife took her lover's hand." Okay, fine, I said that part in my head. But what she did say, out loud, with zero shame, was, "Relax, darling, it's just one night." Like she was going out to a spa. Like this was a rain check on monogamy. Like I wasn't a real person with a soul currently turning to ash. Everyone around us paused. Not in shock, not in protest. Just in awkward, polite discomfort. The kind you feel when someone drops a glass at a wedding and no one wants to clean it up. I didn't say a word. Couldn't. My throat locked up. My legs were heavy. All I could do was nod, again. Nod like the spineless fool I've apparently always been. And then she left. With him. Through our side gate. Laughing. The worst part? She looked happy. And I just stood there, with a paper plate full of untouched sliders and a silence so loud it nearly knocked me over. This was supposed to be a celebration, a night with friends. Instead, it was the prologue to whatever twisted novel my life is turning into. And believe me, this was only chapter 1. I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I just sat on the living room couch in my wrinkled shirt, the lights still on in the backyard, wine glasses half full, and her laugh still echoing somewhere in the back of my skull. I must have blinked 1,000 times, thinking maybe I imagined it all. Maybe it was a prank, some sick party joke with a punchline I never got. But no one texted to say, "Hey, Owen, sorry we took it too far." No one called. Not even her. And by sunrise, the silence had turned from strange to suffocating. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her clothes were gone from the dresser. Even her charger. She took it like she wasn't coming back. I tried to convince myself she just needed space. Maybe a night to blow off steam. But deep down I knew. She had planned this. That smile wasn't a slip of the tongue. It was a warning shot. A declaration. Just one night, she'd said. As if that excused walking out with another man while your husband held a soggy paper plate and died inside. What kind of person does that? And what does it say about me that I let her? I cleaned up the backyard in a daze, tossing half-eaten burgers and lipstick-smeared glasses into a trash bag. My hands were shaking. Not out of rage. No, that would have at least made me feel alive. But from that dull, creeping panic that something irreversible had just happened, and I had done absolutely nothing to stop it. At noon, Jace posted a photo on his Instagram. Him and Valerie, on a rooftop, champagne in hand. Caption, "Sometimes the risk is worth it." I must have stared at it for 10 minutes before realizing my hands were clenched so tightly my nails had left marks. I didn't comment. Didn't like. Didn't scream. I just scrolled down and kept reading the comments. Hearts, fire emojis, people cheering them on like they were some kind of power couple. Do they even know she's married? Do they care? Or did she lie to them the way she lied to me? By evening, I found myself still sitting in the same spot, phone in hand, no new messages. Still no apology, no explanation, and worst of all, no denial. She didn't even try to pretend. It was just accepted, expected, normalized. That's when it hit me. Maybe I wasn't just ignored. Maybe I was already replaced. The next morning started with the sound of my neighbor mowing his lawn. Loud, steady, like a reminder that the world kept moving while mine had stalled out somewhere between disbelief and decay. I hadn't moved much. My phone sat face up on the coffee table, still silent. I kept glancing at it like a hopeful idiot, thinking maybe Valerie would send something. Even a cheap excuse would have been better than this gaping hole of nothing. Around 11 a.m., I finally broke down and called her mother. We'd never been close. Her mom always treated me like I was the safe option Val settled for, but I was desperate. When she picked up, there was this pause before she even said hello. I asked if Valerie was with her. Another pause. Then came the slow, condescending exhale. Owen, she's a grown woman. If she needed a break, I'm sure she had her reasons. That's when I realized she knew. Her mother knew, and I didn't. I hung up without saying goodbye. I just sat there in this weird state of paralysis, numb and boiling at the same time. I didn't eat. I didn't shower. Instead, I opened my laptop and typed her name into every platform I could think of. And there she was, smiling in other people's stories, tagged in blurry brunch pics. One of them captioned, "We stand this chaos queen," with a wink emoji. I zoomed in, and there it was, her hand resting on Jace's thigh, bold as daylight, like I'd never existed. I tried messaging a couple of our mutual friends. One left me on read. Another replied with, "Hey man, maybe you two just need time to cool off. Valerie said you've been distant for months." Distant? That was her version of this. She rewrote our whole story into something where I was the villain just so she could sleep at night. I scrolled back through our last texts, trying to find any proof I mattered. Her last message to me, the day before the party, had been a one-word reply. "K." That was it. That was my warning sign, and I'd ignored it. That night, I did something I hadn't done in years. I pulled out our old wedding album. Page after page of smiles, awkward dancing, inside jokes caught on camera. I looked like a different man. Naive, hopeful. She looked content. Or maybe she was just good at pretending. Either way, I sat on the floor, staring at those pictures, and something in me cracked. Not exploded, just split, quietly, like a hairline fracture I hadn't noticed until it hurt to stand. By day 3, I stopped pretending like I had it together. I didn't go to work. I didn't answer calls. I didn't even bother putting on pants unless I had to take the trash out, which, ironically, felt metaphorical at that point. But what really pushed me into the deep end wasn't Valerie. It wasn't Jace. It was what happened when I finally logged into our shared cloud drive to cancel a subscription. There, tucked in a folder marked Taxes 2023, was a collection of videos. Not documents. Not receipts. Videos. I clicked the first one without thinking, and for a moment, I wish I hadn't. It was a recording from the party. Someone had filmed Valerie standing at the fire pit, making her grand announcement, laughing as she held Jace's hand and said that now infamous line, "Relax, darling. It's just one night." The angle showed my face in the background. I looked pale, like I'd just witnessed my own obituary. But that wasn't the worst part. The worst part was the comments. Because, yes, she had uploaded it to her close friend's Instagram story and somehow, someone saved it. The comments from her friends, people I'd had dinner with, were full of emojis and jokes. Queen behavior. She finally snapped. Owen had it coming. Had it coming? For what? Staying loyal. For being invisible? For financing half of that party. I didn't know whether to scream or throw up. I copied the video to my own drive and sat there for hours, replaying the moment she turned me into a joke. Somewhere around 2 a.m., I posted it anonymously on a private forum. No names, no faces, just the audio, just the moment. The response was immediate. Dozens of strangers asking if it was real, if I was okay, if this woman really existed. One guy messaged me privately and said, "My ex did the same thing, bro. I didn't do anything either." And she got worse. That sentence, "I didn't do anything either," stayed with me. Because that's exactly what I was doing. Nothing. I was letting this woman burn my dignity to the ground while I sat in the ashes with my hands folded. That same night, I got a ping from a shared calendar notification I'd forgotten existed. Valerie had an event scheduled for the next day at 7 p.m. The title? Freedom Dinner, JNV. My stomach dropped. She was literally celebrating it. Whatever this was. And she didn't even bother to hide it from me. Not even digitally. That's when I decided I wasn't going to stay quiet anymore. Not to her. Not to Jace. And definitely not to the people who thought this was some glamorous love story. No, It was time to ruin their fairy tale with the truth. Not out of revenge, but because I needed to stop disappearing. I didn't hear from her for 5 days. 5 days of silence while she played house with a man who once asked if HTML was a new energy drink. I thought maybe she was too embarrassed to reach out. Maybe, deep down, she realized what she'd done. That hope lived in me like a parasite, and I fed it willingly, even though I knew better. But then it happened. Around noon on Thursday, my phone finally buzzed, a new voicemail. No call, no text, just a recording. My heart practically leapt into my throat as I scrambled to open it. For a second, I expected an apology, or at least some pathetic excuse. But what I got was worse than anything I imagined. Her voice, airy and sugar-sweet, filtered through the speaker. "Hey babe," she began, like we were still on speaking terms, like nothing had happened. "Sorry I've been MIA. Things got, well, a little intense, haha. Jace and I are kind of figuring things out right now, and I just need some space, okay?" Figuring things out. She said it like she was reorganizing a closet, not dismantling a marriage. Then came the real dagger. "This wasn't supposed to get so messy, Owen. I really thought you'd be mature enough to handle this without making a scene." My jaw clenched so hard it hurt. Me making a scene? She left me in front of our friends holding a plastic plate and my dignity in shreds, and I'm the one being dramatic? The message ended with a chirpy, "I'll reach out soon when things settle down. Please don't make this harder than it has to be. Bye." I stared at my phone like it had just insulted me personally. I didn't know whether to scream or laugh. That voicemail was a confession disguised as a courtesy call. It wasn't for closure, it was for control. To reframe the story. To stay the victim in whatever fantasy she was spinning for herself and her followers. And then, as if on cue, another notification popped up, this time from our joint bank account. She had withdrawn nearly $3,800. The memo? Freedom Weekend. I had to read it twice to believe it. She was using our shared money to fund her romantic little rebellion, while sending me voicemails asking for maturity. That was the moment I knew something inside me had changed. I wasn't waiting anymore. I wasn't hoping for a text or a knock on the door. No, I was going to do something I should have done years ago, take my voice back. And I knew exactly where I'd start. Not with her, not with Jace, but with the one thing Valerie hated more than anything else: exposure. Truth, raw and unfiltered. She once told me the worst thing in the world was looking bad in front of people. And suddenly, that gave me all the power I needed. I didn't go nuclear. Not right away. The truth is, I didn't need to. Valerie had already lit the fuse herself. All I had to do was stand back and watch where the fire traveled. I started small, quiet, and precise. First, I messaged 4 of our closest mutual friends, the ones who had been there since our engagement party, the ones who stood beside us at our wedding, and sent them the video clip of her little, just one-night performance. No commentary, no accusations, just the footage and a single question. Did you know? 2 of them never replied. 1 blocked me. But the 4th? That was Ryan, my oldest friend in the group, the kind of guy who always kept his mouth shut, but saw more than he let on. He replied within 5 minutes. "You don't deserve that, man. None of us did." And just like that, the thread began to unravel. Ryan told me the truth in fragments. How Jace had been too familiar with Valerie at a New Year's party 8 months ago. How she'd started showing up to events without me and laughing it off. How people assumed we were cool with it because she always spun some clever story about me being low-key and chill with boundaries. I read every word like I was being punched in slow motion. Apparently, I was the last one to know my marriage was on fire, and I was the one holding the hose without water. But I didn't lash out. Not yet. Instead, I did something Valerie never expected. I smiled. Not because I was happy, but because I finally understood. She had carefully curated this perfect little version of herself, the confident, rebellious goddess who didn't need permission. But that version only worked if I stayed silent. So I stopped being silent. I updated my social media profile, just a quiet photo of me alone at the beach, no caption. Then I changed my relationship status from married to it's complicated, and muted all notifications. It took 2 hours before I got a flurry of messages from her friends, the same ones who'd been cheering her on, suddenly asking, "Are you okay? And what happened?" I didn't reply. I wanted them to wonder. And just like that, her image started to bend. Because the truth is, You don't have to scream to shatter a lie. Sometimes all it takes is a whisper in the right direction. And the next whisper? It was coming from someone Valerie never expected to hear from again. I hadn't heard from Heather in years. She and Valerie used to be inseparable, roommates in college, maid of honor at our wedding, brunch every Sunday, kind of close. But then something happened. A falling out I was never fully told about. One day, Heather just stopped coming around, and when I asked about it, Valerie shrugged and said, "Some people outgrow each other." But now, out of nowhere, Heather messaged me. No hello, no lead-in, just a screenshot. It was a message thread between her and Valerie dated just a month before the party, and it made my blood run cold. In it, Valerie bragged about how she was testing boundaries with Jace and how Owen would probably never leave even if he caught us kissing in front of him. She even joked about how embarrassment would finally wake him up. It wasn't just betrayal, it was strategy, calculated cruelty. I read it 3 times, and my hands wouldn't stop shaking. Heather's follow-up message was even more shocking. "I'm only sending you this now because I didn't know she'd actually go through with it." I thought she was venting. But what she did at that party, that was intentional. I'm sorry I kept quiet. I didn't even know how to respond. Part of me wanted to thank her. Part of me wanted to scream. I sat there, heart pounding, staring at my reflection in the black screen of my phone. Valerie hadn't just slipped into an affair. She engineered it, designed it like a performance, and I was the audience, the fool, the final act. But what struck me hardest wasn't the cruelty. It was the way she assumed I wouldn't fight back, that I was too passive, too afraid, too soft to push back on her rewritten narrative. And maybe that had been true once, but not now. I took a screenshot of the entire thread, saved it, then sent a copy to Ryan. No explanation, just the raw truth. 10 minutes later, he posted it, anonymously, on a forum where half our social circle lurked, under a thread titled, "What would you do if your wife said this about you?" I didn't have to wait long. The comments exploded. Strangers, acquaintances, even some of Valerie's so-called supporters started asking hard questions. And the best part? Valerie had no idea it came from me. No idea the foundation she built on charm and manipulation was cracking from the inside out. I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel vindicated. What I felt was strange, calm. Because for the first time in this entire mess, the silence wasn't mine. It was hers. And the louder the silence got, the more people started noticing just how quiet she'd become. It didn't explode. That's the strange part. I kept waiting for it. The meltdown, the rage, the storm of accusations from Valerie once the screenshots made the rounds and the whispers turned to open conversations. But instead, it crumbled quietly. One by one, the people who once clapped for her started backing away. I didn't have to raise my voice. The truth did the heavy lifting. And then, 3 days later, I got a message I didn't expect. It wasn't from Valerie. It was from Jace. Just one line. I didn't know she planned it like that. No apology. No accountability. Just the sad realization of someone who'd figured out too late that he'd been a pawn too. I didn't reply. There was nothing left to say. Valerie never confronted me directly. Instead, I heard from our landlord that she moved out of the apartment she'd been sharing with him. Her social media went dark. Mutual friends told me she'd taken some time off work. But I didn't track her down. I didn't gloat. Because the truth is, I didn't win anything. I just finally stopped losing myself. And that was enough. A month later, I stood in a quiet park by myself, holding a cup of coffee, watching the sunrise through half-dead trees. For the first time in years, I wasn't checking my phone every 5 seconds. I wasn't chasing clarity from someone who thrived on confusion. I was just still. And in that stillness, I remembered who I was before her and who I could be after. I've since closed our joint accounts, filed the paperwork, and started therapy. Real therapy. Not the kind where you pretend everything's fine until it shatters in front of your friends. I even took a short solo trip. Nothing fancy. Just a small cabin in Vermont where no one knew my name and the silence didn't hurt. And you know what? I laughed again. Actually laughed. Not the tired, awkward kind I used to fake at dinner parties. A real, loud, I'm okay laugh. And maybe that's the quiet when no one claps for. Reclaiming peace after someone tried to turn your life into a performance. I'm not angry anymore. Just grateful. Grateful I finally walked off the stage and started writing a new script. One where I'm not the background character in my own life. Thanks for listening. If you've made it this far, I want to hear from you. What's one shocking or unforgettable moment from history that made you question everything? Drop it in the comments. I read every single one. And if you haven't yet, make sure to subscribe for more stories just like this, right here on Reddit Confessions.